Let fill the screen. Let fill the first page of the room with all people on camera. Mark, here you are.
Ciao, Marco.
Ciao, fantastic, wonderful to see you.
Come stai?
Molto bene, thank you,
Molto bene.
grazie. So,
Hello, everybody. I,
yeah,
I, I might be early. I lost track of the time.
yeah,
So,
that's fantastic, Mark. That's fantastic. It's okay. We are starting to populate after after the break. There has been a break, let's say a lunch break, so a bit longer break after already 1 day and a half of presentations, full on. We are doing kind of 12 hours per day with a lot of things happening. Um, let's see if the configuration it's okay. Not sure if I can feature Mark over
wow.
there.
Hello,
So
Dennis.
yeah, Mark. Yeah, there is Dennis. You may find some friends over there. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Uh, we are about 50 people now. Somebody else will enter. We have been, Mark, we have been talking about various things in the last 1 day and a half. Of course, all revolving around animal emotions and animals and music, animals agency or animals, veganism, animals and culture in Hinduism, in Romania, in other places of the world. We have gone through various avenues, but finally we got also to the keynotes. And Mark, it's wonderful to have you here.
Well,
Uh,
I'm thrilled. Just tell me what I need to do.
yeah, we'll see. I'm thrilled to introduce you to those wonderful friends here in the symposium, and also the other way around, of course. And foremost, I'm thrilled to for all of you to have you on board, for all of us to have you on board. Um, Mark, I'm not gonna make a formal introduction of who you are,
Fine.
absolutely,
Fine.
but we have a wonderful conversation, and but let me say at least that we are grateful to have you here, and we are grateful for the tremendously important work that you've been doing and you are doing. Absolutely. That's certainly an inspiration for all of us. It's also a form of support somehow, because when we find other voices, strong voices that also push forward values that we also believe in, that's certainly a form of strong support. And this is also what we try to find with each other here in this symposium. So thank you for your dedication, really, your determination, and certainly your resilience too, because I'm sure that that
Yeah.
that you've been going through also some relevant challenges, and maybe this is something we can also discuss a little bit. But first and foremost, animal emotions, Mark. Uh, this is now a door that has been opened already, and also thanks to your important work and the work of others, we are also trying to bring some contribution to that. But that's not the case. That wasn't the case some time ago, right? That was in some cases maybe a taboo. It was receiving some pushback. What it meant to introduce and to strive and to uh, put your effort into this topic at some point, back in the
Mhm.
days, what
In the
people were
days,
sharing
yeah.
in
The
in
dark ages,
the
yeah.
dark ages.
Yeah.
Would we start from this? What do you think?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, a lot of you know the history of, I guess, cognitive ethology, or the field of cognitive ethology. So yeah, way back when, I mean, of course, you all know that my very close friend and colleague Jane passed away last month.
Yes, of course.
But before I met her, I used to hang out with her husband, Hugo. When he came to the United States, he would stay with me and he would sort slides, and maybe one out of 800 would make it. And I'd look at the ones on the floor that were nicer than any photo I could take at the time with my little brownie camera. Um, but Jane really opened the door for a lot of people, but I don't want to say especially me, but maybe especially for me by naming her animals, talking about unique personalities, focusing on individual differences. And, many of you know, some don't, but, she was a grad student at Cambridge and they got very upset with her naming the animals, talking about emotions and unique personalities. That was taboo, if you will. But she
Yeah.
persisted to do it. And it really influenced me, although my PhD mentor, and he's still going strong, Michael Fox was also in that camp. So he had a PhD in psychology. He was a veterinarian, and he was very open to naming the animals, talking about their emotional states. And then, so through the 70s, then Donald Griffin, who I'm sure a lot of you have heard of, um,
Yes.
he wrote a book called The Question of Animal Awareness that was published in 1976. And, he's an award-winning scientist, national member of the National Academy of Sciences. And he also discovered echolocation in bats when he was an undergraduate at Harvard by basically stringing guitar strings across his dorm room and noticing that the bats avoided the strings. But the reason I mentioned him is because I was at one of the first meetings where he started talking about um, mostly animal thinking. So he didn't really focus on emotions very much. Um, and I met him way back when, and we became really good friends. And the resistance was unbelievable. I mean, I know I've written it in some places where at one of the first meetings where he was talking about animal consciousness and animal awareness, people thought he was senile. I mean, people were really not nice. And it was also at the time when, right after E.O. Wilson published his book, Sociobiology, I mean, it was a really hot area, a hot time, if you will,
Yeah.
historically, because people were really upset with sociobiology. Um, they were really upset that somebody the status of both of them, Ed Wilson and Don Griffin, were writing about things that they would rather not even pay attention to. A lot of the motivations back then was the strong influence of Skinner. A lot of the motivation back then was because people were torturing animals like Harry Harlow and all the other crazy people. And they were afraid that recognizing animal emotions, animal feelings, even animal intelligence, which of course is somewhat related to animal emotions, but really, dumb animals don't suffer less than, quote, smart animals. So there was a lot of resistance. But personally, I just decided that when people, and I still say this when people say, well, how do you know dogs like to play or something, like, or they don't like having electrodes stuck in their brains? I just say, go to a dog park. I mean, just go watch these animals. And so the tradition of ethology was really well developed due to Tinbergen, Lorenz, and Carl von Frisch, who won the Nobel Prize in the category physiology and behavior, which really set people off. I mean, they couldn't believe that people who, quote, just watched animals would win the Nobel Prize. So that it was a really hot time. It was actually in the late 70s, the whole field of behavioral ecology unfolded. I mean, there was no field. I mean, people were doing the research. I was doing field work in behavioral ecology. I'd done work in Antarctica on Adelie penguins and I was in the middle of a long-term research project studying wild coyotes in the Grand Teton National Park, out
Yes.
near Jackson, Wyoming.
Yeah.
Um, so I just decided that these people were nuts to think that animals didn't have rich and deep emotional lives, that they weren't sentient, and and so I mean that was basically the history, and looking at it all as from an evolutionary, but because really I am a biologist, and folding in Tinbergen's ideas about evolution, um, adaptation, causation, and development. Oh, I got it right. I used to quiz my students on that.
Yeah.
And asking questions in those arenas about looking at behavior as a phenotype, which was one of Conrad Lorenz's major
Mhm.
contributions, that it was something that natural selection could operate on. So looking at emotions and cognition, intelligence as adaptations, if you will, evolved, I
Yeah.
guess, evolved phenotypes.
Yeah.
And then we just kept at it. I mean, and then some years later, I met Jane, and we really hit it off. And I mean, we just decided that people. I mean, there's very few people today who deny that animals have emotions. They if they or have feelings, because the word sentience is really popping up a lot now.
Yeah.
A lot of people had no idea. A lot of people would confuse the word ontology with ontology. And maybe
Mhm.
there's philosophers here. I have no idea what ontology means, although I've had the luxury of working with people like Dale Jamieson and Colin Allen and other philosophers. And every time they try to just tell me what these terms mean, I just usually tell them, let's just go get a beer and let's not worry about it all. Um,
Yeah.
so, I
But
mean, yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
no,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
no, I was going to say, so that's where we've arrived today. I mean, I think if you plotted something on a Y and an X axis of, the number or percentage of people who think now versus back then that animals don't have emotions, or they're only behaving as if they have emotions, as if they're sentient. I mean, it's a steep curve down. And frankly, the whole criticism of, oh, you're just being anthropomorphic. I mean, years ago, I stopped talking about that in my animal behavior class. It's useless. I
Mhm.
mean, of course we are. Like, most of us are human beings. I mean, there's a number who or may not be, but so so basically, I think the door opened, and a lot of people gave up. A lot of younger academics gave up because they were criticized and they couldn't get tenure,
Mhm.
um, and things like that. So
Yeah.
that's why, yeah.
But you decided, and despite all of those, despite the terrain wasn't favorable, let's say, you decided to go full all in with
All in.
to go all in is we were playing a poker match. This would be called all in, right? You went all in with this, and that determined also your trajectory, your life, your dedication to it.
Well, I was just astounded that anybody who hung out with non-humans. I agree back then maybe people weren't sure about lobsters and ants, although the whole field of insect sentience is rapidly
Yeah.
exploding now. But I mean, when people would question whether, let's just focus on mammals, you could go to birds and fishes too.
Mm.
Um, I, I just thought it was dumb. I just thought you really you really make these arguments, but then I really did learn that a lot of it was motivated because it was totally anthropocentric. It was speciesist. But a
Yeah.
lot of people back then, and I'm not on social media, but there was no social media back then. People could say things and it wouldn't spread through the world virally in a millisecond.
True.
But I think what it was that by denying but by denying or really considering seriously that non-humans, let's just say mammals now, didn't have emotions, it opened the door for them to torture them in experiments. I mean, there's still horrific stuff going on, at Harvard. They're
Absolutely.
still showing the eyes shut of young monkeys to learn how that affects their behavior. I mean, excuse me? I mean, seriously. But, if you look at the trajectory, you had Harlow, you had Stephen Suomi, you had a lot of people just doing, I mean, unbelievable things to non-human animals. So it was a good excuse. Yeah.
Yeah. So it seems, Mark, it seems that, there has been done so much effort to support the idea of animal emotions and prove it also in so many ways. But it's almost like we start from the opposite perspective. It's more than do animal have emotion? It seems like we are our question is why on earth you would deny it? Why on earth you would not say that animals do have an emotion, right? Why on earth they would not have emotion, right? It seems that we start more from this question, right? And
Hmm. Hmm.
this is what I wonder. I mean, why we have those two possibilities, those two opposite questions, and the one which prevailed is the one that we need to prove for animals to have emotions, for that to be approved and recognized. Why that? Do you think is something embedded in human being? Do you think is the conditioning of strong science, of a certain type of approach? Why on earth actually we didn't start at some point from the opposite direction? So the core
Hmm.
is animal have emotions, and just in case you don't believe animals have emotions, you should prove it, right? Not the person should prove it, right? The other way around. This is what I'm wondering sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we used to always say, well, prove they don't, basically.
Yeah,
I mean, cutting through the long arguments. I think it's because a lot of humans don't realize, and researchers too, that they're really speciesist. They don't realize that they're speciesist. A lot of it is because a lot of the people weren't trained to think, if you will, evolutionarily. I mean, there's a really distinct difference between, I mean, classically, now I don't know because I don't really pay much attention to it, between, say, ethology and comparative psychology. You know,
yeah,
um, there was a paper published by Frank Beach, who was a really well-known, I guess, comparative psychology. It was called something like "The Snark Was a Bojum." I never understood the title, but you would just look at the comparisons people would make among animals who were vastly different taxonomically, unrelated, and so it may be the data might have been interesting, but they were pretty meaningless in terms of from an evolutionary point of view. But once again, I think that when you begin to think of behavior as a phenotype or as an adaptation, you begin to ask the question, why did emotions and sentience, evolve, not if it has evolved.
yeah,
But the strong, the whole the strength of behaviorism, Skinnerian type of things.
yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
this links to what you just said. If somebody doesn't believe that animals have emotions, or let's stay on mammals now, just go to a dog park. And I know you use that often in your writings, in your blog. And it's straight and clear, right? So if we are open, we observe with a certain degree of openness and curiosity and attention, not just for dogs, it also goes with cats and any other species.
mhm, mhm.
We we can connect at some point, at least to believe directly or indirectly, even though we don't recognize specifically certain emotions, which or certain behaviors, but we can feel that something is moving there at an emotional level, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
I know you're a great supporter of this idea, aren't you?
Which
Yeah,
which idea?
yeah, the fact that we by observing animals, dogs or cats or other animals, and we if we are curious and we observe them behaving intraspecifically or with others, with humans, for example, we
Hmm.
can see that they have emotions. We can at least have an input,
Mm.
start to believe that, start to catch some elements of their emotions. Then, of course, we need to go deeper into it and study it and so forth, right? And yet people push that possibility back. There is something that also in the daily life of people, there is a pushback also in that for that possibility.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, historically, the field of ethology was really European um, endeavor. And yeah, I mean, yeah, there was a lot. Yeah, I'm only laughing. There was a lot of pushback back then, much less now. But I mean, the whole basis of ethology is just really careful observation and description. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Um,
Mhm,
and and a lot of this stuff was, I think, motivated by the publisher Parish atmosphere.
mhm.
I mean, I remember people saying, well, your field work is uncontrolled, but they ignored the fact that their lab work was over controlled.
Mhm.
The animals, they were forced to do, I mean, they were really forced to do certain things, in order to get some reward. I don't know. And they would have all these different paradigms and things like that, asking animals to do things that had nothing to do with their natural behavior, for example.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and when you number animals, you've just taken away their identity as individuals. Um, and, you know, the, the naming of animals. I mean, when I was involved in some early studies and left a really prestigious program because I named some of the animals. I refused to take part in the horrific experiments they were doing, but I would watch these animals and I named them, and I was told that I that I wasn't allowed to name them, you know. And I said, well, it's just easier to name them than number them. But it's a really important transition because over time, journals allowed people, researchers, field workers, um, to name their animals. And some people, and that animals are who or who's, not it or which or that. I
Yeah.
mean, those are really big, big changes. I remember I was flying somewhere and I was working on my little computer, and the woman next to me, we just started talking. Turned out she worked for Microsoft. And so I said, hey, I got an idea for you. Like when you run things through spell check, how how about not changing who or whom to it or that or which? Really,
Mhm.
you'd get an error. And she said she would look into it. Well, maybe she did. I don't know if she did, but it really didn't change. But it's these just little things to some people that are huge. And once again, focusing on individuals. I wrote a paper years ago called the Point Oh Five Club, something like that. You know, that that they would data would be clumped. Well, you mean you all know this, and I'm sure many here know more than I do about it, but it would be clumped, and so papers would be reporting trends.
Yeah.
Um, and then I always used to say, and Michael Fox used to always push this too, and I know Jane did in her field work, is, well, what about the quote exceptions, the outliers? There must be, there must be a reason they're not doing what you expect them or want them to do. Um, and it's because they can't or they won't do it because of the social situation in which they find themselves, And I mean, when I traveled a lot, I went to, a lot of different places and took part in um, a lot of studies of like captive, well, they're captive. I mean, dog experiments where people bring their dogs in, and I'm not saying the research was bad at all. I think the research was really well controlled and stuff like that. But people would wonder, well, why is this lab finding this and this lab didn't find this, blah, 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 blah. And different dogs, different experimenters, different reward systems. I mean, just a different Umwelt, if you will.
Yeah.
So it didn't mean that the research done here was better than the research done there, where they didn't get the same results. It was just because they're just different situations. But the argument that field work was uncontrolled and their work was so controlled is I used to say, well, you're just controlling who the animal is right out of the equation. I mean, you're asking them to do things. Maybe they don't want to do it, And I had a couple of primate researchers tell me over the years that one of the reasons that they really believed that some work on captive primates, where the animals wouldn't do something or didn't do something, was because they were bored after a while. They just,
Mhm.
so that so the reason I'm going off on this is because the argument that field work is uncontrolled and lab work is highly controlled, and therefore lab work is better, is just absurd. I mean, there's good field work out there. I mean, we followed identified individuals over years. We knew genetic relationships. It's harder to do the field work. I mean, I remember when I came back from Antarctica and people would say, all those penguins, they're all the same. They do the no, 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 no. If you spend enough time watching these penguins, yeah, they sort of look the same, but then they really don't look the same.
Yeah.
And there were phenomenal differences in personalities. And one story that I actually wrote it up recently, but I had written back then was these little Adelie penguins would steal rocks from other animals' creches or nests. And they were the bold ones. They would just run in, steal a rock, take off, get chased. They do run, in this very awkward way and they trip over rocks. And then there were some who would really just sit there and look like you might if you wanted to steal, someone's food off their plate. And they would really take care, they would really see what's going on. And the second that, say, a penguin, it was hard to, male or female, but the second one of the penguin on the nest would turn around, the other one would walk over slowly, grab a rock, stand up, look all around, and walk away as if they had done nothing. Okay? I mean, those are powerful observations. And so once again, early on, and then, just when I started doing early in the field work, I mean, we were out for 8.5 years. I think there was someone in the field 99% of the number of days in 8.5 years, because I had a full-time postdoc up there. And I remember the very first time these young coyotes came out of their den when they were like 21 days of age. Same hole, same parents, and vast differences at that age in their personalities. Shy ones, bold ones, some who we would wish well, but really obnoxious ones. And I've seen the same in wild foxes and wild wolves, and I'm sure some people here have seen it in their animals. So once again, the reason these stories, I mean, if you just take the time to watch, ethology is all about patience, watching them. You got to focus in. It may not generate like a paper mill. You do an experiment in the morning and you have a paper published the next morning. But over time, you see the changes in personalities. I mean, Rick McIntyre's work on the Yellowstone wolves, he's now published 5 books on them.
Yeah.
And I think his latest one is called Thinking Like a Wolf. I mean, people would say, well, wolves don't do this, wolves don't do this. Well, yeah, they do. I mean, he's written books about it, so once again, I really think it's just a different approach. And some of you may have known Jaak Panksepp or the name.
Yeah,
So he was a really good friend of mine, but I just did, and I was very open with him. I mean, I really liked his company. We became close friends. But he was looking at how rats like to be tickled and they enjoy play and they laugh, and then did horrific experiments. And I actually think my friendship with him was one of the most valuable because we could be friends. But I just said I cannot and I will not write much about your research. And that's not a personal quote attack on him. If you knew him, he was a great guy. It was just like I said, these animals enjoy being tickled. They have fun. You write about this. You use the words, and then you do horrible things to them. I decided I'm not gonna go there. Maybe I would have years ago a little more than now. People just have to decide what they want to do, and then go do
absolutely.
it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And thank you for bringing our attention to the core, to the foundations of ethology that are really into observation, right? The core of ethology to bring, this is important to remind. Yeah, because now it all gets more complicated with you need to collect, use various tools, integrate observations with the various
Well,
system models, technology, and so forth. But and may be necessary. I'm not saying that. It may be
mhm.
important and necessary, but it's important also to remember the core of observation, right?
Well, yeah, and I think there's been just a lot of changes. I mean, when we did our early work, like looking at play bows, just analyzing how long they lasted, the form, were they stereotyped, were they, highly evolved ritualized signals, and we would film them and then analyze it frame by frame. I mean, you can do that now on your iPhone and be home.
Yeah.
And what took us months to do, I mean, I worked with this gal. She was in eighth grade, and she emailed me. It's frightening to think that she's now out of college, and but she emailed me when she was in eighth grade and said, "I want to study playing dogs. I love dogs, and the question I have is whether familiar dogs play differently from unfamiliar dogs. But I'm sure we know that. No, 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 no. We didn't know that. This would have been, yeah, this would have been probably 12 years ago. So." I told her that, and we set up a study. I mean, it was really cool. Her family became her field assistants. She had two dogs, so she knew who her two dogs didn't know. She went to different dog parks around Boulder, and so she had her Confederates. I don't know what the word is, but she knew who her dogs knew, and she knew who knew her dogs. So she collected data on her iPhone. She sent it to me, and she said, "Well, I'm going to feed these data into some program." And I said, "No, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to sit down for about 10 hours and watch the film." And at first it was like, "Oh, I want to go to a party with my friends and all that." But she actually did that. And just because I wanted her to get the feel for what these animals were doing. And I'll tell you, after a couple of hours of doing it, she got really into it.
Yeah.
So the reason I'm telling that story is because I recently, or a couple of years ago, was asked to review a paper. And really what it was, people collected film, they put it into some digitizer, they digitized this, they did that. And then I actually read it, and I said, well, this is really interesting. I'd like to know more about these dogs. The researchers had no idea who these dogs were. They had, so I said, well, they're seeing a change in their behavior over time. Did the dog have a bad dream that night? Was the dog hungry? Was the dog sick? No, but seriously.
No,
So I think what I really appreciate, I mean, just because it was basically, the zeitgeist at the time was you just had to sit down and watch these animals. I just found my field notes a couple of weeks ago, my notebooks from Antarctica. they're decades old with all the hand, I mean, everything was handwritten. I mean, you might have had a little tape recorder that cost $500, maybe
Yeah.
the size of my TV remote, which now, you couldn't even buy. But I think your question is really important because I'm not quite a Luddite, although I'm somewhat of a Luddite. But but people just go, oh my goodness gracious, if I go out and spend 2 weeks watching these animals, it's I need to collect the data. So what I used to do with my students when we were analyzing films, I would have like maybe 6 or 8 students. We'd watch a film clip and then we'd talk about it and we could learn from one another. I just wanted them to all agree on certain things so that I knew that when we were looking at the data that we were agreeing that we were seeing a particular behavior pattern. And when we started our field work in Jackson, in the Grand Teton National Park, one of the things once we realized we had a good and a visible population of coyotes, and we were lucky to have it for over 8.5 years. I said, okay, tomorrow we're going to get up at 4 in the morning. It was during the summer. And we're going to sit there for 12 hours. You can go get your lunch or a beer or something like that. No pens, nothing. You're going to watch the animals. We needed spotting scopes. And what my students learned, we painted all the spotting scopes and the cameras dull black so that there was no reflection. I said, I want you to just look at them and get a feel for who the individuals are. And then we'll go out and we'll trap them, and which we did like live traps, and we'll mark them. And at first, of course, some of the students said, oh my, this is ridiculous. I said, you can leave. I mean, you don't have to do this work. Once again, it's because you need to watch the animals. If you go back to a lot of Hans Krook's work, Jane's work, George Schalla's work, other people's, I mean, that's what they basically had to do. They just had to watch the animals and get a feel for them. So I think part of what's being lost today is, and I've seen this, like I said, people go out, film a group of animals, throw it into a digitizer, get the information they want, and write a paper. And then you ask them about individual animals or this, and they have no idea because it went from their iPhone to the digitizer to their computer to a manuscript.
Yeah. Mark, I think that if the paper you reviewed, you just mentioned, if that was a double-blind review of some sort, they may have recognized who was the reviewer making those comments, maybe asking for the personality or some that there is on the dog, right? But that links well to the individual personality of dogs, of animals for that matter, of every species, of every type of animal, every species. To understand every species, a species, we need to have an understanding of their ethogram, their umwelt, but we need to also, where that is required, to go into the details, into the specific personality of that very individual. That links also well,
Mhm.
for example, to dog training, to animal training in other contexts,
Mhm.
but also links well to compassionate conservation, for example. And this is very important, I know, for you.
Mhm.
Would you like to say
Well,
more on that?
well, yeah, I mean, no, you're totally right. I mean, the focus on individuals, um, I mean, early on, there's earlier natural history books that are wonderful, that focused on that, but people would write them off as being non-scientific or something like that, when in fact they were highly scientific. The people actually watched the animals and took careful notes. Yeah, so the focus on individuals, I mean, for me over the time, I never even realized that it was a debatable issue, if you will.
Mm,
I mean, we were able to follow known coyotes and certainly the wolf work in Yellowstone, a lot of the primate work now, other animals, of course. We could follow identified individuals over time, and we would know their genetic relationships. We'd know moms, dads, aunts, uncles, siblings, littermates and older siblings say. Um, so it never dawned on me that making, we shouldn't be focusing on individuals, not talk about the dog, the wolf, the rat, the mice, because there is no the dog for, focusing on dogs for people who study dogs like
Mhm.
Marco and I do. So you're right, from the practical aspect, dog training. I mean, I work with, good, positive, force-free trainers, and one of their, and everyone who I work with has had a background in animal behavior, and been certified, dog trainers and have other, credentials. But focusing on the individuals was really critical. And so I also work in conservation. So when the field of compassionate conservation began to develop, it really was focusing on there's a number of basic principles of it. One is first, harm. The second is that the life of every individual matters. I mean, it never even dawned on me that that wouldn't be the case, because classical conservation is murder incorporated in many ways. I mean, it
Mm.
just is. Killing's fine. Those debates are still going on today, and I'll get to that in a few minutes. And so for years, I've written a bunch of books and worked closely with a woman, Jessica Pierce, who's a philosopher, and so, oh God, it's scary to think that it was about 12 years ago we started talking about individuality. We just started talking about ethology. She knew far more ethology than I cared to know about philosophy, although I learned a lot from her and Dale Jamieson and others. So we started using the phrase animal well-being rather than animal welfare, because animal welfare doesn't really protect that many animals. I mean,
Mm.
it's basically the that old calculus,
It's
um,
slippery for sure, is a term.
it's that you're being kind, but yeah, greasy may be slippery. That's okay, right? But we started talking about it. So we wrote a book called The Animal's Agenda, and that whole book was motivated by replacing the science of animal welfare with, if you will, the science of animal well-being, to draw the distinction that the life of every individual matters.
Yeah.
And it was at the same time, I mean, it was totally, I don't believe in coincidences, but certainly they were synchronous. The field of compassionate conservation was emerging. And Dale Jamieson and I had written some papers back in the early 90s. One had the phrase reflective ethology in the title. I think people like Marion Dawkins were horrified by it. Seriously, I'm not picking on her personally, but just they were horrified by talking about reflective ethology. Somebody said, "Is that like looking in the mirror at yourself?" So I said, "No, it's reflective ethology, not reflective ethologist." And we started focusing in on the value of individuals. So what's interesting historically, and I think you'll see it now, and Marco's questions are really important, is that all these things were churning in the background, going back to Jane's work on naming animals, individuality, personalities, following known individuals, blah, 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 whole ethology, the whole ethological approach following on Tim Bergen's ideas, for example. So we started writing about individuals, and over time, because I'm a field biologist and I got involved in conservation protocols where, oh yeah, there's a lot of the X, there's a lot of rats, just kill some of them, it's fine. There's more. And I kept thinking, well, no, no, no. Each and every one of those individuals is a sentient being. I mean, they have a perspective on life. I mean, they value their life. And I used to say, if somebody came up to me and said, well, there's a lot of men like you, human men, males like you, so, you're disposable, I would just say, well, no, thank you. I'd rather not get involved in that discussion. But slowly but surely, the field of compassionate conservation was emerging, and it became named. And once again, one of the main tenets of it is that each and every individual life is important because they have intrinsic or inherent value.
Yeah.
Um, and you just can't go kill members of one species to save or help members of the same or other species. And the very the one of the I think it was really the first meeting on compassionate conservation was held in late August into early September 2010, and it 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 brought together people in all different fields. Um, but it was really a remarkable meeting. There were people there on all sides of the fence, if you will. Um, there were people there who were very, very uncomfortable um, about compassionate conservation. I remember the very first breakfast I went to. I knew a lot of the people there, but I didn't know there were a lot I didn't know. And we sat down and ate. And one of them just said, I'm just saying, I've been vegan for years. And one of them just sat down and looked at what I was eating and said, this whole compassionate conservation game, that's what he called it, it's just a bunch of vegan radicals. So I'm not a very argumentative person. I didn't say a word. And he got really uncomfortable. He started doing displacement behaviors like non-humans do because he felt uncomfortable. And somebody said, "Do you have something to say about that?" And I said, "About what?"
Mhm.
And well, I wasn't trying to be an ass. I was just thinking, well, no, no, no. There's a lot of really good conservation biologists here, who aren't vegan, who aren't animal rights activists. And I actually remember saying, the compassionate conservation is not the radical view. It shouldn't be the radical view. It should be the status quo of conservation. The radical view is that you just go in and kill these animals wantonly. And and so over time, it's really gotten hold. There's a lot of successful projects. I remember so I mean, it's scary to think that the meeting was 15 years ago. But over time, a lot of younger researchers, new researchers, people who have been doing research have really focused in on what I think is, I mean, other than saving individual lives, is focusing on the reliability of data. There's a woman, Gisela Kaplan in Australia, who's been writing a lot about field techniques studying birds. I mean, the
Mm.
field techniques people use change the behavior of the animals. I mean, that's not rocket science. So I think one of the good things that's come out of compassionate conservation is people are paying much more attention to how they're treating, observing, intruding into their lives, the animals who they want to study. Because I reviewed some papers and I said, well, these are really interesting papers on mostly on carnivores, but they have to put the word stressed in the title because they're looking at the home range and the movement patterns of stressed fill in the blank animals
Mm.
because they trapped them, they marked them, they mishandled them. And Gazella wrote a really great paper a couple of years ago, and I interviewed her for Psychology Today, just talking about work on birds. And it's really opened the door to, okay, I prefer not to kill animals and otherwise, harm them. But you could also look at it from the reliability of the data. And um, I know I wrote a paper and I really can't find it now because it was probably before there was a computer, but maybe not that long ago. But I summarized 40 different studies and showed very clearly. And once again, it's not meant to be insulting or critical because people didn't even think about it then. But you mark animals, you trap animals, you treat them as individuals in one way or another, and it changes their behavior. So people are studying the home range or movement patterns of trapped rodents, for
Mhm.
example. Um, but once again, the blending of focusing on individuals and right on the ground, I mean, literally today, and I mean Friday, whatever the date is, that is July, no, November 7th. I mean, in Colorado, we brought wolves in 2 years ago, almost two, well, about 22 months ago. and wolves are getting killed in the name of other wolves. And the Colorado Parks and Wildlife, they demolished a pack of wolves who formed from the first 10 who were um, released into Colorado in December 2023 because they were eating cows and sheep. Of course they were. I mean, they're prudent predators. I mean, if someone wants to cook me a meal, that's fine. I'll eat it. I mean, and these are easy prey. The reason I'm saying that is right now, I mean, this week, the same argument goes on. No, you can't be killing these wolves. You know, they demolished the first pack of wolves. I mean, the chances that any of those wolves from the first 10 would form a pack and a family with a mother and a father and their children was so low, and they did it. And then CPW came in and killed them. So once again, people say, well, you know, this is all academic. No, it's not. It's right in my backyard in Colorado that they are killing wolves for being wolves. Okay. And when you start to use the word compassion with some of the ranchers, I remember one of the criticisms of compassionate conservation was it was too soft and too feminine. I gave a talk in Sydney, Australia, in I think it was in February of 2013, and the title was more academic, like the pros and cons of compassionate conservation, which could have been the most boring title I've ever that they wanted. And the day before, I said, let's change the title of this talk to "Would You Kill Your Dog for Fun?" And the reason that, and then I mean, the attendance almost doubled. So I wasn't trying to be an ass once again, but really, when you think about this, would you treat your dog in the same way as you treat these
Mm.
wild animals? Say wolves, coyotes, dingoes, all members of the dog family, all sentient mammals. And so I gave the talk. I talked about compassionate conservation and the basic principles. And at the end, a guy stood up and said, well, this is really interesting. But he actually said this. It blows my mind these days, but I mean, I wasn't hearing things. He said, it's really soft. Where's the science behind it? It's really feminine. Thank you, but I didn't say a word. And I don't study people, but once again, he started fidgeting, doing all these displacement behaviors that you do when you're embarrassed.
Yeah.
Um, but that was one of the criticisms. I think I worked with a woman named Arian Wallach, who was really an early leader in the compassionate conservation movement, if you will, or program. Um, but once again, with patients, it's really taken time where you can see you don't have to harm animals to help other members of their or other species. And right now, there's debates going on all over the world about killing wolves. In the States, it's what is it, killing barred owls to save snowy owls. I get mixed up on the species. Um, you know, um, and one of the things about compassionate conservation is it's just telling people it's just wrong to do this. I mean, I don't care if there's 10 million brown rats. It's just wrong to kill 1,000 of them because there's so many other members of their species. Anyway,
Thank you,
you
thank
got it.
you. This was brilliant, Mark. And uh, you've been mentioning here and there about uh, unavoidably Jane Goodall, and uh, she just left her body recently, and I would uh, take this opportunity also to dedicate a moment of this conversation to her legacy, to the tremendous work that she has also been doing. Is there any anecdote? Jane was important to you. You've been sharing a lot of things. Is there any anecdote that you want to share to celebrate her somehow?
Well, here it is. I don't know if it's seeable because
We see you in a Italian car or in a truck or something with the car no, it's Jane
no,
with the
that's
dog.
Jane in a
It's
in
Jane
a
with the dog. Yeah, it's
but
Jane with the
but yeah.
dog.
So we did a book for Jane when she
Yeah,
turned 90. It was a special surprise book. I'm not trying to push the book just so you'll buy it, but I think it's worth. So we did this book, and it was a surprise book. We did one called The Jane Effect when she turned 80. I mean, she was really a close friend of mine, and
I know.
I could fill an hour with stories about her, which she wouldn't mind at all if she was still with us, and I think she still is with me for sure. Um, but this, first of all, she was a great scientist, really analytical. Her book, The Chimpanzees of Gombe, is, people say, oh, yeah, but, she was just this radical conservationist. And what do you
Mm.
think? I don't even answer questions like that. I mean, it's just dumb to say. Um, she was a great scientist. She had a wicked sense of humor. She used to complain that people, there was an article, I think it was in The Guardian, where she just complained that people didn't realize that she had just a great sense of humor. Um, what else? Well, I mean, personally, we both really like single malt scotch. So I have to tell you, over the years, we consumed, and
That's good to hear.
she would have no she wouldn't, I mean, even when she was with us in her body on the earth. I mean, yeah, I mean, there was an article in the New York Times that had something about her glass of scotch in the title, actually. But just really an amazing woman to work with, and really keen observer of animals. I mean, if you just, I don't know, you just go back and read her. Well, I mean, it's a lot of it's summarized in her book, The Chimpanzees of Gombe, that was written 39 years ago. So the reason I'm saying this, the criticisms that she was, oh, just some blonde, good-looking lady going out into the field and making chimpanzees popular. No, 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 no. I mean, her notes were really, they were very detailed, and the papers and books I wrote with her were great. And I was just actually putting together a bunch of faxes from her, and one of them starts off. She wasn't on email when we started writing the 10 Trusts. So we would fax and talk on the phone all the time. I finally said, Jane, you got to get on email. The people in her office were typing the manuscript, and one fax, because I just got them out, and I had to get them, fixed up so you could read them. It started out, she would always write to me and my dog Jethro. So she would write, "Hi, Mark and Jethro," and Jethro's nickname was Jay. And the fact that I was just playing with it this morning, and some of you have met Mary Lewis. Mary traveled with Jane all over the world, and I was just putting together a bunch of faxes, and one fax just started, "Dear Mark and Jay, oh dear, it's her again. I'm sorry," and basically went on to saying, basically, I hope I didn't torture your words, blah, 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 blah. Hey ho, love Jane. And the reason I say that is because really that was one of the things she had just had a really great sense of humor, and a hard worker. People would say, oh yeah, she just puts her name on things. No, I remember just because we traveled a lot together, and when we were writing the 10 Trusts, Mary Lewis, Jane, and we just shared a house that this group at Eastern Washington University gave us. We were doing roots and shoots groups together, um, and just, I mean, the detail that she would. It was crazy making for me sometimes.
Mm.
But so yeah, her sense of humor, her dedication to her work, as you really know. I mean, she was trapped.
Absolutely.
COVID really put the clamps on her. I think
Mm.
she was going stir crazy at home, but she was doing Zooms 24/7, it seemed like. And the minute she could travel again, she was back to traveling extensively, like 300 plus days a year.
Mhm.
And she was just oh yeah, and so we have a kids book coming out in about 14 months, which is lovely. So we had just about 2 months ago, um, we agreed on the text. Um, you know, if anybody here has done kids book, they're the hardest books in the world to do. And that, I
Mm.
mean, so they about a year ago they wanted it's about an elephant. I really am not going to say more now, but I could definitely say more soon. And so the publisher wanted just notes on the natural history of elephants, and they wanted around 2,000 words. So I sent them 10,000 words because I like elephants. And I got a lot of good input from Cynthia Moss and Joyce Poole and Ian Douglas Hamilton, other, really good elephant researchers. So we took that, and then they had to boil it down, lay the book out. And at each and every step, they would send us the information. And I worked out a great way while Jane was traveling. I mean, we Zoomed and sometimes talked on the phone. I would send her what I liked in blue and the stuff I didn't like in red. And some of her emails would come back blue. I mean, that was it. It was just, there was nothing else. Blue loved Jane from wherever she was in the world. But I tell you that story too, because, ultimately there's about 1,000 words. And once again, it was just meticulous. I would say, what do you think about this? And so the book is really it's about a young elephant who loses his mother and father. Do humans kill him basically because
Mhm.
the elephants were trying to live elephant lives. But I use that as an example where every step of the way, I mean, literally every step of the way, I would send her stuff and she would, get right on it. And what happened was I knew she was traveling, and on the Tuesday before she passed away, we got the first preliminary artwork. I mean, kids' books take a long time, and I sent it on to her and Mary Lewis and the woman who was traveling with her, fully expecting to work with her the next morning. And I'm a cyclist. I was out on a long ride. I didn't hear from Jane. I wasn't worried about it. I knew she had just been in Mexico. She was staying in LA. And then when I stopped to eat a candy bar, I had like phone calls and texts. So I learned that she had passed away on a bike ride. um, and so I miss her. So last week I rode 91 and a half kilometers to celebrate the 91 and a half years she was on the planet. Almost, almost to the minute, actually, if you take into account the number of different days there are in different months. Um, so, yeah, it's really hard. I mean, there's just no other word. I mean, she's still around, I can tell you that. Um,
For
and,
sure.
and stuff. Very, very powerful woman. There's just, well, you all know that, but the stories about her sense of humor and when I look at the old letters, um, I I find and relevant to this, I will share this because I think it's really interesting. I don't, yeah, you won't be able to see it, but I could send it to people. So in July of 2000. Yeah, it was the 40th anniversary of research at Gombe. She had gone there in 1960. So she wrote me this postcard. She was at the Kilimanjaro airport. Her plane was delayed, and she had just been to a conservation meeting. I actually, thanks for listening to this because I just put something together now that I had not put together. Was she had been at a meeting? She wrote to Professor Mark and Mr. J. That was a joke, but that was my dog. But in the postcard, and I just had it refurbished because it was really hard to read. It was really old. She'd been to a conservation meeting. Oh yeah, this is amazing. And I think she was in East Africa. She may have been in Tanzania or Kenya. Um, and she said, so I went to this meeting and I taught people about animal cognition, you know, and animal sentience. And then she put the word feelings in capital letters. Um, she had a really nice handwriting, but she could jam like 4 pages of text onto a postcard. But the reason I say that is because I talked to her soon after. I think she was in Boulder, and it was really, in some ways, and I'm going to have to make note of this when it's something I'm writing. She really was planting the seed for compassionate conservation among people who, not that they were resistant to it, but people who had no idea what sentience was. That's yeah. So anyway, so once again, it's just sort of it's
That's
just a long it's just a
yeah,
long
no,
story.
that's fantastic, Mark, and it's also generous sharing, very fond sharing. And I see the chat is also responding very fondly to this particular part of your of your contribution, and for sure, Jane is remembered, is among us, and it
Oh
keeps
yes,
her work, keeps
she's still
inspiring us.
no, she's
And
still here. I
yeah,
promise you.
yes,
Any
and
questions? Are we going to do? You don't have to listen to me all morning. I don't. Well, I guess wherever you are, it's morning here. But I'm willing to answer questions if you want to do it. It's up to you. I'm just sitting on my
well,
couch.
thank you so much, Mark. Well, I should say that the chat is populated with various comments and questions,
Mhm.
but also we you can have a quick look to it, but we need to be aware of time, and because we will have another
Oh, okay.
another keynote in 10 minutes, so we will need to wrap it up anyway, so I can make
Okay.
sure that you receive all of those comments and questions,
Oh,
so we can somehow find a way to continue the conversation. Something is sure, it's certain that we need more time with you, that next time we will need to set a couple of hours just to make sure, even a bit more, just to make sure to have more time to share and conversate. But Mark, um,
oh, I just figured out how to open chats.
oh, okay. But
I'm
don't don't
okay.
worry. I'll make sure that you receive
Yeah,
all
could
the
you do that?
comments, and
Yeah.
also we will have the recording of this conversation. So
Oh, okay.
we'll find a way for this to get to you, and of course, um, from on a personal note, and also in name of everybody being here, let me express again the gratitude for your sharing, important in many ways, and hopefully we will have other opportunities to discuss in all the possible directions. And wonderful to hear that you love single malt scotch. This is a wonderful idea for a drink at some point. Yeah. Uh,
Yeah, well, I used to meet with Jane, and it would be 8 o'clock at night there, at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And when we gave her her book, it was like New Year's Eve, 2023, and it was noon here or one, and I picked up a glass,
yeah.
and but there was nothing in it, and I was faking it. And Jane said, "Mark, your glass is empty." So I said, okay. I was going to fill it with tea, but I didn't have any tea. So I had 2 shots of scotch and I spent the rest of the afternoon sleeping on my couch. But anyway, thank you all. Email me if you have any questions. No, I really am honored to thank you for listening to me. I didn't realize until a couple of days ago. Yeah, I just become speechless about Jane and revisiting ethology. So thank you all for your patience and your time. And if you're in wherever you are, have a great rest of the day. And grazie mille, Marco.
Grazie mille, Mark. Ciao, touch base soon. Ok,
Yes, ciao, ciao.
grazie
Thank
mille.
you.
Ciao,
Bye bye.
grazie. Ciao.